What if I told you that the golden arches of the Hilton Empire weren't built on luxury alone, but on a foundation of sheer, unadulterated chaos that would make a soap opera look like a documentary? We all know the name as a global synonym for high-end pillows and overpriced minibars. But the real story of this dynasty involves a nomadic childhood in a territory that wasn't even a state yet, and a patriarch who fled politics because it was too dishonest even for him. From a billionaire father who tried to disinherit his own blood to a Hollywood icon who alleged her daughter's conception was a literal crime, the Hilton family tree is less of a botanical wonder and more of a lightning rod for scandal. You might think the modern headlines are wild, but the vintage drama involving Vegas elopements, international legal wars over stock certificates, and a socialite who died in a car despite being royalty is where the real grit lies. Today, we are stripping away the velvet curtains to examine 22 of the most bizarre and disturbing habits that transformed this hotel lineage into a permanent fixture of tabloid infamy. Imagine inheriting a name that opens every door in the world while simultaneously being told by your own father that you aren't worth more than a rounding error in his checkbook. Conrad Hilton wasn't just a businessman. He was a man who viewed his family as a collection of assets and liabilities, often treating his wives and children with the same cold calculation he used to acquire the Waldorf Astoria. The transition from a small-town bank hopeful in Texas to an international titan of industry created a vacuum of normalcy that his descendants have been trying to fill for nearly a century. This isn't just a list of rich people being eccentric. It is a calculated look at how one man's obsession with a clean legacy resulted in a multi-generational trail of broken marriages, public meltdowns, and some of the most baffling financial decisions in American history. Prepare to realize that the sweet life was actually a series of locked doors and very public skeletons. Conrad Hilton grew up in the rugged territory of San Antonio, New Mexico, long before it actually achieved official American statehood in 1912. He spent his formative years navigating a frontier landscape where his Norwegian immigrant father, Augustus, ran a general store out of their large adobe family home. This isolated environment instilled a ruthless survivalist instinct in Conrad that would later define his cold corporate approach to handling both his business rivals and his own children. Before he was the king of hospitality, Conrad served as one of the very first Republican representatives for the newly formed state of New Mexico. He developed a deep-seated hatred for the legislative process, publicly claiming that the bureaucracy, cheating, and lying of the political world were simply too much for him to handle. Ironically, he fled the halls of government for the world of high-stakes banking and hotels, where he would eventually master the same dark arts. The entire Hilton Empire almost never existed because Conrad originally went to Cisco, Texas, during the 1919 oil boom with the sole intention of buying a bank. When the bank owner hiked the price at the final second, a frustrated Conrad walked across the street and bought the 40-room Mobley Hotel instead out of pure spite. This impulsive purchase, fueled by a failed bank deal and a Texas heatwave, turned a one-time politician into a legendary hotelier. During the brutal peak of the Great Depression, Conrad's hotel business was hemorrhaging so much cash that he actually lost ownership of his entire company to the Moody family. He was reduced to being a mere employee in his own empire, working for a salary while desperately plotting a way to buy back his name from the creditors. He eventually clawed back control of 8 hotels through sheer grit, proving that his appetite for dominance was stronger than a national economic collapse. Conrad's marriage to his second wife, the legendary Hungarian actress Zsa Gabor, in 1942, was less of a romantic union and more of a hostile takeover. He reportedly treated Gabor as a decorative trophy rather than a partner, famously stripping her of her identity by forcing her to change her name to Georgia. This psychological erasure of her Hungarian roots was a standard tactic for Conrad, who demanded absolute subservience from everyone living under his roof. The conception of Francesca Hilton, Conrad's only daughter, remains one of the darkest and most controversial chapters in the entire family history. Zsa Gabor later alleged in her autobiography that the encounter was entirely non-consensual and occurred while the couple was already in the process of a bitter divorce. This horrifying claim cast a permanent shadow over Francesca's life, as she was born into a family that viewed her very existence as a legal complication. Conrad's eldest son, Nicky Hilton, was such a notorious disaster that he was kicked out of almost every elite boarding school he ever attended before reaching adulthood. He had zero interest in the mechanics of the hotel industry, preferring to spend his time fueling a growing addiction to gambling and various illicit substances. His father viewed him as a profound disappointment, yet Nicky's chaotic lifestyle would eventually pave the way for the family's modern obsession with tabloid fame. In a twist that sounds like a Hollywood script, Nicky Hilton allegedly carried out a secret romantic affair with his own stepmother, Zsa Gabor, during her marriage to his father. Gabor later hinted in her memoirs that she got to know her stepson much too well, suggesting a betrayal that would have shattered any normal family dynamic. Whether the affair was real or a calculated PR move, it highlighted the toxic and incestuous nature of the Hilton inner circle. When Nicky Hilton married a teenage Elizabeth Taylor in 1949, the entire wedding was actually a massive publicity stunt funded by MGM to promote Taylor's film career. Taylor was only 18 years old at the time and was quickly thrust into a nightmare of domestic abuse and Nicky's escalating substance dependencies. The marriage lasted only 205 days, ending after Nicky's violent temper reportedly caused the young actress to suffer a traumatic and life-altering miscarriage. Despite his public reputation as a dangerous and abusive husband, Nicky Hilton remained the most sought-after bachelor in Hollywood throughout the early 1950s. He was briefly engaged to actress Betsy von Furstenberg, who eventually fled the relationship after realizing Nicky spent his entire life playing cards and drinking until dawn. He seemingly had no desire to work or contribute to the family legacy, yet he remained the primary heir to the Hilton throne for years. Conrad Hilton was so obsessed with the Hilton brand that he founded the first truly international hotel chain in 1949, effectively colonizing the globe with his name. He viewed his hotels as a way to spread American capitalism during the Cold War, often coordinating with the government to ensure his buildings were in strategic locations. This global expansion made him one of the wealthiest men on Earth, yet he remained pathologically frugal when it came to his children's allowances. By 1951, Conrad tried to force Nicky into a responsible role by naming him the vice president of the Hilton Corporation, hoping the title would magically fix his son's character. Instead, Nicky used his new authority to further his reckless habits, eventually getting into serious trouble with federal authorities for his erratic behavior. Conrad watched in horror as his eldest son became a walking liability that threatened to burn down the entire multi-million-dollar corporate structure. The generational curse of the Hiltons claimed Nicky's life in 1969 when he died of a sudden heart attack at the young age of 42. His decades of hard partying and substance abuse had finally caught up with him, leaving a massive void in the family's succession plan. Conrad, who was 81 at the time, outlived his heir apparent by a full decade, a reality that deeply embittered the aging patriarch in his final years. When Conrad Hilton finally passed away in 1979 at age 91, he executed a final, cold-blooded maneuver by leaving 97% of his massive estate to a Catholic charity. He effectively disinherited his surviving children, Baron, Eric, and Francesca, believing that unearned wealth would only lead them to the same ruin that killed their brother Nicky. This shocking move triggered a decade-long legal war as the children fought to reclaim the money they felt was their birthright. Baron Hilton, the second son, spent 9 years in a grueling legal battle against his father's own charitable foundation to win back control of the family stock. He argued that a secret clause in the will gave him the right to buy back the shares, a claim the foundation fought with every lawyer at their disposal. By the time Baron finally won the court case in 1988, the stock's value had quadrupled, making him a billionaire through pure legal persistence. Francesca Hilton was treated even more harshly than her brothers, receiving a measly $100,000 from her father's multi-million-dollar fortune in 1979. Conrad reportedly justified this by assuming she would eventually inherit millions from her wealthy Gabor aunts, so he felt no obligation to provide for her. Francesca spent the rest of her life in and out of courtrooms, desperately trying to contest the will and prove she was more than an afterthought. Throughout her adulthood, Francesca had to deal with a revolving door of 7 different stepfathers, but none were as problematic as Frederick Prince von Anhalt. This final stepfather was a self-proclaimed prince who eventually gained total legal control over Zsa Gabor's life and finances following a 2002 car accident. He and Francesca engaged in a decade of public warfare, with the prince accusing his stepdaughter of being a manipulative fraud who was only after the family jewels. In 2005, the legal feud between Francesca and von Anhalt reached a boiling point when he sued her for allegedly forging her mother's signature to obtain a loan. The lawsuit was eventually dropped because Zazaza was too ill to appear in court, but the damage to Francesca's reputation was already done. She found herself locked out of her mother's estate and her father's fortune, becoming a royal outcast in the very city her family helped build. The most tragic figure of the Hilton dynasty, Francesca, actually died in total poverty in 2015, just months after reports surfaced that she was living in her car. Despite being the daughter of a hotel titan and a Hollywood legend, she suffered a fatal stroke while staying in a low-rent apartment in West Hollywood. In a final cruel twist, her mother was never told that her daughter had died, as von Anhalt feared the news would kill her. While one side of the family collapsed into tragedy, Barron's son Richard Hilton focused on expanding the empire through luxury real estate in Los Angeles. Richard's 1979 marriage to Kathy Avanzino was a rare moment of stability for the family, creating a power couple that would eventually produce the most famous socialites of the new millennium. They managed to navigate the family's dark history by pivoting from the hotel business to the lucrative world of high-end celebrity branding. Paris Hilton's younger sister, Nikki, was actually named after her great-uncle Nicky, the man whose life was a cautionary tale of addiction and failure. Unlike her namesake, however, Nikki Hilton managed to build a successful fashion career and mostly avoided the destructive habits that plagued the previous generations. Her 2004 Vegas marriage lasted only 3 months, but she quickly course-corrected, eventually marrying into the Rothschild banking dynasty and merging two of the world's wealthiest families. Before Paris Hilton took over the world in the early 2000s, the Hilton name was strictly associated with corporate prestige and dusty hotel lobbies. She successfully weaponized the family's penchant for scandal by turning her private life into a global reality TV phenomenon, starting with The Simple Life. This strategic use of bad publicity completely rebranded the Hiltons, proving that the family's most enduring habit wasn't just luxury, but the ability to survive their own public disasters.